Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Empower Hour for kicking off Legislative Action Week. We're really excited that you can be here if you're here in person or watching the video at a later time. My name is Stephanie Snow. I'm the organizer that's been working with the Pacific West region, and I'm also joined by Lee Fisher, who has been organizing with the Intermountain region. And then we have two very special guests with us tonight. We from our legislative department, and we're going to get right to them. But I just wanted to draw everyone's attention to the fact that we are doing a legislative action week this week. We had a legislative action night back in November where we made phone calls and sent emails to our lawmakers. And so we wanted to kind of make that a regular thing. So this will be our second try at a legislative action, but this time we're doing a whole week. And so tonight, this is our kickoff with our legislative experts here, our legislative department. Tomorrow, then, we'll be emailing and calling your lawmakers. Wednesday, we'd like you to share those messages with your friends, your family, your network, and see if you can get people to also make some of those phone calls or send those emails. And then some follow-up on Thursday. And then Friday, just celebrate all of the action that you took this week. And also, maybe do some get-togethers if there's that opportunity in your park or in your program. And also along the way, we have provided some materials for writing postcards and letters as well. So you could weave that in at any point. So we did make up a toolkit for this legislative action week, and we've shared that with your regional organizing committees. So if you have not seen that yet and you'd like to take a look at that, you can contact your regional organizers or Lee or myself, and we'll for sure get you those that toolkit and the materials that you might need to take some action this week. But now I'd like to just turn this over to our legislative department to talk about what it is that they do and why it is such an important part of NTEU and provide such a good opportunity for our members to get involved in legislative issues. And so Kata, I'll go to you first since you're the director of our legislative and political department, and then you can take it from there. So if you don't mind introducing yourself and then talking a little bit about the legislative department.
Sure, absolutely. So my name's Kata Sybenga. I'm the Legislative and Political Director for NTEU, and I'm happy to be here with you guys tonight. So thanks for having me. And I'll let Matt introduce himself more later, but Matt is one of our legislative representatives who works specifically on National Park Service issues, and among other things. So he can go into that a little more. But our legislative department has basically three major things that we do. We work with our legislative representatives or our lobbyists work with Congress to bring your issues to them, to help you bring your issues to them, and to make sure that we're following all the things happening on the Hill to provide that information to members about what things that might impact them. So that's kind of the first bucket of things we do. The second is really beefing up that helping you take action part, right? So that's where we do our grassroots action. And that's where we help members, both leaders through the chapter and also members either meet with their members of Congress, send messages to members of Congress, take other actions that can really help bring our issues forward with their members of Congress. And why that's so important is that there are we can talk to them. Matt can go up and tell them about National Park Service issues, and he'll learn about them and make sure that he tells them correctly what's going on. But they don't really want to hear from Matt about those issues. They want to hear from you about those issues, not just because you work at the National Park Service, but because you also are hopefully one of their constituents, because you would go see your actual representatives, right? And why does that matter? Because then they want your vote when it comes time to vote. And so they want to make sure that they're serving their constituents and shoring up those votes when it comes to election day. So that gets to our third bucket of things, and that's our election work and our political work. And that kind of has two different forms. It's our United We Vote program, which is our election program. And that is where we really work with getting your messages, your interests, your issues before candidates who are running, whether they already hold office or are new candidates who are running for office. And we have through that program, we endorse candidates and we meet with candidates. We send people to talk to candidates, members to talk to candidates about the issues that matter to NTU members. And then the second side of that is the money. And we have a PAC where we which is your PAC as an NTU member. And we raise money through that PAC from NTU members and retirees to give money to candidates that support federal employees and the issues that NTU members care about. It's just for NTU members and retirees and staff of NTU. We get to contribute as well. But it's really focused on just your issues and things that matter to federal employees and finding members of Congress, current and hopefully future, that will support you in the work you do. So that's the basic overview of the department and what we do for with and for NTU members. And now I guess unless you had a different idea of stuff to do, let's have Matt introduce himself maybe and talk a little bit about how he does what he does with specific to more NPS.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. Thank you, Kata. My name is Matt Sowards. I am one of the lobbyists in our national office covering National Park Service issues, as well as a couple of other agencies. I also cover our federal benefits portfolio, so healthcare, retirement. I cover whistleblower protections and whistleblower rights. So a fairly broad portfolio, but one thing that I have done quite a bit of work on since joining NTU staff has been with our National Park Service chapters. And that has involved being that liaison between the NPS members and Capitol Hill, as Kata was saying, taking those stories to the Hill, making sure lawmakers are aware of the frontline on the ground situations happening at each installation, telling them what our members are facing, and also making sure that we are connecting our members with their members of Congress. So making sure that we are plugging you in with those offices so that you can come and talk to them, as a federal worker, as an NPS employee, but also as a constituent and someone who lives and works and has, a family in their communities. To make sure that they're hearing that from you, because that is a more impactful way of bringing this message forward. And, one of the things that I think is important, and one of the things I think is interesting, that we do here at NTEU, is our department is very engaged with our membership. Like we have a lot of opportunities to exchange thoughts and ideas with one another. And sometimes it's in the forms of lunch and learns, like I'm doing one with our national, with the DC national chapter of NPS next Wednesday. Sometimes it's evening events like this here, depending on, timing and location and what time zone we're working in. But engaging with one another so that we can put those policy ideas together and put those forward in a way that's going to help our NPS workforce. And a couple of things you actually, if you log on to NTEU.org now and go to our Legislative Action Center, you'll see a couple of those things. One of which on the DOI workforce, a bill HR 4854 is to reverse RIFs. So it would be reversing RIFs at the Department of Interior for all the agencies in DOI, including NPS, was authored by Congressman Jared Huffman out of California. And this was one that, came up to us that our members who were in that area had been plugged into Huffman's office, had seen, had flagged it for us because he had done DOI and in some of our energy agencies. So we were able to, very quickly put information out so that our members not only know about it, but have a way to lobby for those bills and to lobby on their own behalf. Also, again, through conversations with members, we have an action letter up there on the Federal Retirement Fairness Act, which came to us from the DC chapter of NPS, which is a bill that would allow you to include your time in like temporary service or seasonal services into your retirement calculations, which was something that was important to some of those members in NPS who began as good Lord, temp and term and seasonal. I've got a little tongue tied there. Members of the federal service. So, our engagement is more than just, kind of like throwing all the information at you and saying, go forth and lobby, but actually trying to have, relationships with each of our chapters, with our members in those chapters, and engage in a productive dialogue in a way that moves our national NTU goals forward and like very specifically NPS goals forward too.
Thank you. Sorry, I was having trouble unmuting. So I think you kind of touched on some of some of the questions that we had, but just to drill down a little more specific, for our newly organizing chapters, which is, who we're talking to tonight, our NPS employees, what can you drill down into what is the value to union members in having the legislative department speaking for them or lifting their voice? Either of you want to jump in?
I'll jump in first, but Matt, feel free to add to it. I think that our department is full of some people who are just incredibly gifted at this work, but also have a ton of experience and lots of different experience. Matt, for instance, worked in the Senate and worked for another union before coming to NTU, so he has a lot of background in both the labor area and also on in the Senate. We have others who have been with our department for over 20 years, others who worked for other members on the Hill or worked at OPM and have just a really strong knowledge of the federal human resources issues. So we have a really wide variety of folks on our lobbying team, but then we also have just grassroots specialists. We have our political director has worked on campaigns for years. She's worked with lots of different nonprofits and other groups doing political work. So we just bring a lot of different experience and knowledge that we can help share with you to help you get that message across in different ways. And we work really very much as a team, where Matt mentioned a lot of the areas he works on, but often we're working side by side with, Matt and Stacy, our grassroots director, will be together talking about how they can bring out some grassroots work on certain issues and what's the best way to reach out and how can they help the members do that. Certainly during the election, that happens a lot with our political director and our political team. So we just have a lot of people who can really help bring this forward, even if you're the ones that are then bringing those messages to candidates and to members of Congress. We've helped arm you with whether it's talking points or strategies on how to talk about something or strategies on how to address a certain issue. We have a lot of advice we're happy to share. Sometimes we are wishing people would ask us more. So we're always happy to help where we can. And so I think that's the main thing, right? And I think some of the stuff Matt already talked about of how we can help drill down on certain issues and provide those things also is there. Matt, I don't know if you had anything on that specifically to add, since you are the actual one doing this with NPS.
Yeah, well, I mean, kind of from a more global perspective, we take all that and we've been successful with it. And I think the reason that that it is beneficial to the union and beneficial to the union members that we have is that we have been successful in either achieving goals or preventing bad things from happening to the federal workforce. Specifically, we leveraged all of the expertise and background and personnel that we have that Kato was just mentioning a moment ago into pushing back against a very aggressive budget reconciliation package a few months ago, and that mixed with our folks in DC and our members on the ground having those one-on-one conversations with their members of Congress and staffers in those members' offices. Made sure that we didn't see things like drastic cuts to federal pay and benefit and workplace rights. So, just adding onto all of what Kata had said, we have been successful in leveraging the talent that we have and the members we have, the talented members that we have, working together and working with each other to move the ball forward for NTEU.
You mentioned, Matt, before that you have brought forward some issues that were brought to us, to NTEU, to you by our NPS chapters. Can you kind of delve into that a little deeper and talk about, I mean, I know that our members and potential members have a lot of issues and a lot of things that ideas, that they could bring forward, and just kind of talk about how that process works and maybe how it worked when you've worked with like chapter 296 or 336.
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, I love having conversation with our members. So anytime there are ideas or thoughts or questions in anything that fall into that realm of legislation, I always encourage people to reach out to me. I also do a lot of work with our field office, so the people who do the day-to-day rep work with our chapters. And sometimes, again, depending on the relationship the field rep has with the chapter president or the comfort level that the members have, they'll go to that person first and then loop me in. Sometimes folks will come directly to me. But in any of those instances, we usually set up a time to meet either on the phone, exchange emails, over Teams, something of that nature. And I like hearing from the member and hearing in their own words like what the issue is, what they're seeing on the ground, why it's important, and then we can kind of bounce ideas off of one another as to trying to figure out what an appropriate path forward would be. And that also involves looping in our field reps and making sure that our field and sometimes our negotiations department are all kind of working together, because sometimes there will be a legislative angle that could provide a remedy or a solution, and then other times it's going to be something that's more in the grievance and arbitration realm, or maybe the negotiations folks have a good relationship with their management counterparts and we can get something done administratively. So all of us kind of like in our own buckets still work together and try to coordinate responses after we've talked to members. But I think that NTU more so than other places I've been, but definitely more so than other unions I have worked at, really prioritize and emphasize that personal touch between members and the staffers who are representing them, not just in legislation, but in the other buckets of our organization as well. And I think that's pretty special and something that I would be remiss if I didn't mention here.
Do you have anything to add to that, Kata?
No, I think Matt's exactly right. I mean, I think we have we would have to, some issues we're not going to have a legislative solution, but even then we still could talk through it and figure out, is there a strategy here? And maybe there's not an actual legislative solution, but we could get a certain member of Congress to write a letter or to make a call to an agency and ask about it. And that may or may not be always as effective depending on the administration and the member. And we're finding that right now, I think a little bit more, but that is something that in the past we've been able to really leverage that type of outreach too. It doesn't have to be an actual like piece of legislation. It can be just an inquiry from a member of Congress can spur things to action.
Can I hop in real quick here because I actually think we have, isn't there an example of we our Chapter 336, the National Capital Region, when trying to get the Washington Monument closed for safety. I think we got Congresswoman Norton involved in this.
Yeah, she did, and Matt, this might have been before your time, maybe. But yeah, she's been involved in quite a few National Park Service things in the National Capital Region. And I know that one of them we actually had video of like it flooding and some other things like that that we sent to her office, and then she brought it up to the administration like, this is not okay. And so there's ways for that to work behind the scenes that can be really effective. I mean, I think that's one of the things we all in my department do better than I would say other legislative departments is we like to work behind the scenes. We don't need like the glory of it. We don't need the big legislation and the big whatever. We just want to get things solved. And I think sometimes the way to do that is those behind the scenes quick conversations that we can get a member of Congress to have with an agency and just say, are you serious? Like, there are rats in this building. Why are we not dealing with this? That happened. And members of Congress did. They called and they said, I can't, why isn't this being dealt with? And then it was, right? So I think, there are, those are some extreme examples. I don't know if any of you have seen that building in the National Capital Region that they were in. It literally flooded when there was rain. But it was, yeah, we've been able to leverage some of those kind of things very well.
Thank you. And I think that's a great point that I think when we hear, legislative department, the mind immediately goes to, the lobbying and all of that piece, but that informal, that behind the scenes, as you say, work is really very, very important. And sometimes, as you say, more effective or quicker. And we can get things resolved. And I think that goes to my next question, which Matt, you've already kind of touched on, but just the importance of having a legislative rep that's assigned specifically to National Park Service. Maybe you can expound on that a little bit.
Well, I'll first just say that Matt has been great with all of these issues, but we have a fantastic team. So whoever gets assigned to any of these agencies it's always a really great representative for them. But I think it also helps them really drill down on those issues, and be able to have those conversations and know what to bring forward so that there's not like constant learning curve because there's no way like I can know what's happening at every agency. So we need to have people who really can focus on those issues. Matt, anything to add to it?
No, I think that covers it. I would, just also say every unit that we have, like every agency, has a lobbyist attached to it. So we don't have anyone who's kind of just floating the breeze over here. Like we do have someone on our team is monitoring these issues, NPS or otherwise. So if you're under our umbrella, you've got somebody in the legislative shop who's watching out for you on Capitol Hill.
And then we also are able to help our members. We have more formalized ways that our members can reach out and get involved in legislative issues. And one of those is our legislative conference. And so I'm wondering if you could give a little information about our legislative conference and what happens there.
I'll start on that one too. But so our legislative conference is every year. It's often the first week of March, but it's right around that time every year, which is a great time to be coming to DC to lobby Congress, right? So we have between 350 and 400 members generally at our legislative conference come in every year. It starts Monday, it ends Thursday. So it's quite a long amount of time that you come in, you learn about how to lobby Congress and about our priority issues for that year, and get talking points and tips on what to do. And, all the different information. And then we send you on your way and we set up meetings for you in all of the different offices on the Hill. Generally, you're going to go to the ones where you're a constituent, right? Because as we talked about, that's the people who really want to hear from you. So that's at least 3 meetings, hopefully, that you have. But sometimes you may join like your NPS fellow members who live nearby, but they're a different member of Congress, and you're going to join them and help them with that meeting. So we try to get people in there, but it is important that you're talking mostly with your actual members of Congress. And we set up those meetings. We also provide workshops. We have lots of events. We have quite a few receptions and things like that. But often at those receptions, we invite members of Congress to come. You get to actually interact with them. They talk, they speak with you. We invite staff to at least some of those events to also from the Hill to also talk with you. And we try to really make sure that people on the Hill know that we're there that week and that we're and bringing us a certain message. And our message every year, this is actually very timely to talk about this, but our priority issues every year are set by our Legislative Advisory Committee. And this is made up of members from across the country, from different chapters, from different agencies. And every year it's a different group of people. And they meet every January to talk about what our priority issues should be for the year. And we actually met with them today. So it's been a very long day. But we met with them today and talked through everything that had happened on the Hill in the last year, not just on the Hill, but a lot of things that had happened. And then they talked through what should our priorities be for the next year. And then now we'll get that information out to our members broadly, but also that will inform what we bring in our legislative conference up to the Hill. And the talking points we give to our members and the training we give to our members will all be around that. So we really try to focus on things that will at our legislative conference on things that apply to broadly the NTU whole family, right? The whole NTU universe, all our agencies. But while you guys are in those meetings talking to people, you bring your personal stories and you talk about your agencies and you make sure that people on the Hill understand all the good work that federal employees do. And that is critical. Obviously you bring your issues, you bring your like what your asks are, but the biggest thing you can do is making sure that they understand the good work you're doing and why it's so important, not just for you as a worker, but for the American people, because many of these members of Congress have no idea. And that is horrifying, right? Like to think that they have no idea what you're doing and the work the government does. But it really is true, especially some of the newer ones. And so getting in there at the legislative conference, leading up to it, following up after it, we really try to stress that people need to make sure that not only are you bringing those issues to Congress, but you just make sure they understand the amazing work federal employees do every day. And you can bring that to them as a federal employee in a way that other people can't. And so that's one of the key things. Matt, add on to that.
Yeah, no, I not a whole lot else I can add, but I will say something that I like, just like as a staffer at NTEU, that comes with the legislative conference is that when we have a large group of us together, it gives us the opportunity to have more informal conversations with our members and actually not just like getting to know you, talking about issues that are important to you, talking about issues that are going to be important either this year or during a congressional cycle, and building a rapport with one another that I think is really important. In terms of the actual lobbying that our members do when they're going on the Hill, I do want to be clear. Like we are going to every member of Congress's office, well, regardless of their party affiliation. So we're not just talking to Democrats. We're not just talking to Republicans. This gives us the opportunity to go in, particularly with so many constituents in town at one time, and build relationships in offices where we might not have been able to. And specifically, going back to the earlier conversation Kata was having about the importance of having actual constituents talk, it will be easier for you as a constituent to get into like a Republican office than it would be for me, just like a lobbyist in DC to get in and actually make a difference. But if you all, as constituents, are the ones going in and driving that conversation and making inroads with that office, it can pay real dividends. And, that is our legislative conference. Having so many people in town at the same time is a really good opportunity to make those inroads.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And we always say at the end of the conference, like, this is just the beginning, though, right? Like, and that's where, like, the other grassroots work that we talked about earlier kind of dovetails out of the conference of, like, now take it home and you do it at home and you make sure that you go meet with those staffers or the member while they're back in the district, because that's where they're talking to their constituents. And so all these things work together to build those relationships so that when there's another reconciliation bill that's going to cut your retirement benefits, you have a contact and you call that person and you say, what's going on? We need your help. And they are much more likely to hear that message, right? If they've met you, they know you, you've built that relationship. And so a lot of our leaders who come to our legislative conference really do a great job of taking that work that they do here in Washington and moving it into the district and building those relationships, either with the member themselves in some cases, which is always obviously great. But even if not, with like a staffer who's going to be there, and the staffer is really on the Hill. Matt and I both worked on the Hill. Depending on the member, some staff have incredible amount of power because members really listen to them. Um, Even the members that do a lot of like the final decisions on their own, right? Like they're still relying on staff to advise them on issues. And so being able to make sure you have that staffer and you really make sure they're educated on the issues, they then bring that to the member when a vote comes up or when you need some action. And that's a really critical thing.
I think I'm jumping in here for the rest of the hour. So staying on actually this note, um, talking about how people take it home after the legislative conference. How does our legislative and political department help our chapters connect for like community events and town halls or meetings with their representatives back at their home districts and other offices?
Well, we send out grassroots alerts to help drive people to do things on certain issues. So that would drive you to that action center that we put in the chat. And that's actually not just for members. So you can use it now. You can send it to your family. You can send it to your friends. Anyone can send letters from our action center. But we also have other resources behind our member wall that members can use to do some of this stuff. But on actual outreach, our grassroots director, Stacy or Matt, or whoever is the legislative representative for various agencies, can help with that outreach. So we can help find the right staffer to reach out to set up the meeting. We can help actually set it up if you need help with that. Follow up if they're not being responsive. There's all kinds of ways that we're happy to help you set that up. And then once it's set up, we're happy to talk you through like, okay, so how are you going to bring these issues up? How are you going to talk about this? What way will you be able to say this that actually makes sense to a member of Congress or their staff? Because when you go in and talk about things in your lingo of your agency, it may not translate as well as you think it might, right? And so we might listen to you and go, okay, so but what does that mean? And help you like figure out, okay, how do we get this message across? How can we be most strategic in how we talk about this? And that may mean that it's just, if it's like a broader issue, that may mean that we need to set up a meeting with not just you, the NPS employee, but somebody from another agency to talk about that perspective on it and to bring people together. So we try really hard to help bring people in different areas together from different chapters to do some of these meetings. And so, which is obviously adds a layer of complication to setting these things up. But we do try to do that as much as possible to try, because really there are times where certain issues will be better heard from different people. And depending on who the member of Congress is and what the issue is. Matt?
Yeah, I would just, take a moment here. I'm sure you've heard from several people who've said the same thing, but this is one of the reasons why it is so important that we have a non-government contact information for you. So as we're moving forward, as we are setting up alerts and sending out information and trying to get people to engage in collective action, making sure that we're not using government resources. So not a .gov email and not a government phone number. So just any kind of like personal cell phone, personal email, just making sure all of this is being done off of government equipment. And that also makes sure that you are, getting in the NTEU phone tree, the NTEU email alert, so that we're able to alert you when things are happening, when votes are happening, and when we need folks to engage with their members of Congress.
But it's a good reminder. So you were mentioning how we talk about issues may change based off of the audience. So we've talked about talking to each other as federal employees and talking to members of Congress, but can NTEU help our NPS chapters with building community and public support for their legislative goals?
No, I definitely think that that's something that we can work on, particularly more like in concert with the communications and PR department, in terms of not just the wording and the phrasing, but actually placing things in like local papers or local, websites that would be more impactful than, if we put something like the DC market, for example, that might not build as much on the ground frontline support. But no, I definitely think that that's something that we can help with, maybe not quarterback ourselves, but would be participants on.
Yeah, and I mean, we're trying to do more and more of that, right? So one of the things we've done recently at a training that we did, and we did a fall training for members, and we had a track on communications, right? And we talked about how do you communicate to different audiences about our issues. So actually, some folks from your organizing department were part of that track as well to talk about how do you talk to members about these issues, or how do you build membership around issues, and how do you just talk to people, because it's not always easy, right? And to figure out who's the audience and what's the best way to approach this with that audience. So we talked there, about the members, but then we kind of came in and we said, okay, now let's talk about how do you talk about this to a member of Congress? And then how do you shift it when you're talking to a candidate for Congress? Because candidates for Congress, it's a whole different thing. They don't have the power right now, right? They're looking for you to give them that power. And so you have you can take a different approach. You can be like, well, here's what you need to know and what you need to do for me. Whereas when you're talking to a member of Congress who's already sitting there, you might say a little of that, but you're mostly saying, here, help me, right? And so how you approach that can be really different. And some of it's just the slightest tweaks to how you might talk about it. And I think that goes also to how do you talk to the public about it? And how do we make sure, not just in the media, but in how you talk to your family and friends and people in your life, so that they understand what you do and what's happening right now or at different times to you in your work, and how that's going to impact them. Because in the end, everyone needs to understand how what we do, either positively or if we can't do our work negatively, will impact them.
Yeah. I I think a lot of our NPS members, organizing teams, but just in general, NPS employees really feel how the public pays attention to their agency and the support that they feel from the public, and trying to figure out how, in any way, to kind of harness that. One of the ways that this shows up is through various nonprofits that connect with the Park Service. Does NTEU ever partner with nonprofits that have common legislative goals to advance our members' goals?
Absolutely. And I'll let Matt speak to the specifics of Park Service, but I'll speak more generally to it. We have built coalitions with lots of different groups, and we join coalitions that exist to, if nothing else, provide them information. So in a different context, right? I'll bring one up. We have obviously IRS. IRS, we cannot comment always on all the tax things that are happening, right? But they impact our workers to some extent, right? So we are in a coalition with like other groups that care about tax issues so that we can help inform their positions and also engage with them to help them push our positions. And we do that. I know we do that with with many other issues, but we also do that in concert with other unions and other employee groups on the broader issues. We are part of quite a few coalitions that work with either other unions or even employee groups that have managers, because a lot of the same issues come up for those folks as they do for us. Not the organizing issues, not some of those things, but the benefits, the pay, like a lot of that stuff is all related, and they care about those issues too. So we work with like for example, one called the Fed Postal Coalition, which is federal and postal employee groups. It's unions and non-union groups. And I think we have like 34 different members of that group, and we all try to work together on the same issues. Often these are the more government-wide things, they're the pay benefits and those types of things, because we try to work on things we all agree on. And then we also work with like the Federal Workers Alliance, which is a group of unions. And uh, we are that have federal employees as part of their union. So we then can work on different issues with that group because that group is all unions, right? So we try to find in both nonprofit and in unions and employee groups like different ways to leverage those things. We've done this in lots of different areas. So Matt, I don't know if you have anything more to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, one big one that's been very helpful with NPS specifically is the National Park Conservation Association,
Mhm.
who, right when the president released the budget proposal, or mid, spring of last year, put statements out immediately talking about what the human impact would be of the proposed, almost a full, it was like $900 million proposal in cuts to NPS, and what that would mean for actual on the ground staffing in parks, and the possibility of closing parks and not having these vital resources available to the general public. And having statements like that from, not from like the union, but from, park and conservationists' perspectives, I think really did go a long way in pushing back against those cuts, which is why you didn't see the number that the White House requested come to fruition, either in, CRs, or in the omnibus proposals that we've been lobbying on more recently. So, that is one, I think very recent and clear example of how like the union and nonprofit world are able to partner up and use collective interests to push back on harmful activities.
Yeah, that's really great to hear. And you answered one of the other questions, which I know that a lot of NPS employees wanted to hear about, is working with other unions. There are a lot of unions that represent NPS and DOI employees, and knowing that folks can come together and just have one strong federal employee voice, I know is important. Is there anything else that you wanted to say on the working with other unions? Since you did start to touch on it, you might have already said it all.
No, I mean, I think it's a really clearly important to do that, right? And so we've been trying. I think NTU in general is doing that across lots of our different things. I mean, if you look at our litigation right now, we are partnered with other unions on a lot of that. We are with, in lots of different aspects of what we're doing, trying to make sure that we're coordinating. Sometimes it's visible and sometimes it's not. But we're trying to make sure we're coordinating to bring the messages out and help bolster each other's work, because we don't need to all do the exact same thing. Sometimes it's better if like somebody's doing this and somebody else does this part, and shares those things together so that we're we have our department and legislative and political department at NTU right now is 9 people. There's only so much we can do, right? Like I have a great team, but there's only so much we can do. And so we need to be able to leverage like other people's information, their contacts, all of those things. And we do that as much as possible across the unions. And we really do have some pretty good relationships with most of our counterparts at the various unions. Not just because of these coalitions, but because we show up at the same events all the time and we just are generally in the same space and bringing forward the same issues when we are.
Thanks. I think that actually gave a lot of really good context and kind of behind the scenes to how we work together. So before we get to opening this up for questions, I've got one more that I know that people are going to be curious about. And you started to touch on this at the very beginning, but I'm hoping you can expand on explain what is the PAC? What does it do? Who gets to contribute to it? Does anyone have to contribute to it? Do we have one? And if so, how are endorsements and priorities determined? Kind of demystify essentially what is a PAC, because I think people hear about them a lot, and especially associated with their unions.
Yeah. So we do have a PAC. It is called the Treasury Employees Political Action Committee. PAC stands for Political Action Committee. So it's called TPAC is how we say it. It is open for people who are NTU members and staff and retirees. So we can only raise money from those groups of people. And those groups of people therefore have a lot of say in what we do with that money, right? So we at headquarters, we do a lot of the work of fundraising for all that, getting you information on how you can give, and trying to get people to give. But in the end, once we have what we have, we take that money and we try to use it to bring your voice to people. So y'all may have heard of some, not great things that call PACs free speech, and that has led to some problems. But because of that, we really need to be engaged in this, right? So we have, other people are spending so much money to have their voices heard by candidates that we really need to be in that game and really try to make sure that we use every tool we have to bring our issues to people who are going to be making those decisions. So um, we have our endorsement process, we endorse people, we give money to people. We don't always like publicly endorse everyone we give money to because sometimes we give money to someone because we get a chance to talk to them. And then they don't do anything good for us. So we then might not actually endorse them, right? But so there's two different parts of this. But we do, our Matt and other legislative representatives on our team do attend a lot of events that are put on by candidates using our PAC dollars to get in and really have a chance to talk to them. And sometimes those candidates are current members of Congress. And then we have a record. And we have a record of what they've been doing, what they've said, what they've voted, and we keep track of that. And every year we put out a voting record that says, okay, here's how they did. And then we have candidate profiles on our website where you can see their lifetime score. Here's how they've done over their whole career as a public servant and how they voted with us, what they've done. We try to, in that when we actually try to give we'll round people up if they've sent letters and done other stuff for us. We'll round people down if they've turned us down on that kind of stuff. So, it's their lifetime score of what they've done for us. And those really drive people who are already in office if we're going to be able to give them money or not. But when someone is not currently holding federal office and they are running for one, so they have no record, we have a pretty intense process to figure out who we will endorse, and that includes members. So what we do is we do an initial thing where we send them a questionnaire and they fill out on policy issues, but also on campaign information. So we can see if they have a viable campaign. And we look at that as staff and we make a kind of first call on, okay, this person has a viable campaign and they answer these policy questions in a way that we appreciate. And maybe they need a little education on some of our issues, but they seem to be going in the right direction. Then we talk to them. And if they're still in the running at that point, we set up a call with members from their district so that members can actually talk to them, bring their issues to them, and make sure that they answer our questions in a way that is positive for federal employees and on our issues. And then the members recommend, should we endorse this person or not? And we take that recommendation to Doreen Greenwald, our national president, and she makes the final call. So that's our endorsement process for new candidates. And we really, I mean, that part is critical for our members to be engaged in that decision making and making that recommendation, because we want to make sure that we're actually putting our money and our time towards people who will make a difference and that our members think will make a difference for them. And so that process starts generally after the primaries because we don't want to get involved early. We don't have enough money in our PAC to spend it in primaries. So we focus on after the primary, the people who are really in the race, and we make sure it's a pretty close race. We're not going to waste money on people who aren't going to win. As much as we'd like to support some of them that are great, that's not something we tend to do. We try to really people who have a shot and who have a campaign that really could be successful. And then we bring those to our members and we get information from people like you on what they think. And we try to move that forward. Matt, I don't know if you had anything to add on that.
No, I would just also add that we try to make it as easy as possible for you to contribute. So any way that you feel comfortable with contributing, we have an avenue for that. So some people like to do it by credit card or check one time a year at a conference. Some people like to do payroll deductions. I have my PAC contribution taken out of my paycheck, every 2 weeks. I don't even think about it. It just goes straight to TPAC. But we are very flexible in the way that we can take money from folks. So whatever, works best for the member and works best with how they're wanting to give, we can usually find a way to make that work on our end.
Yeah. And right now, payroll deductions aren't always working at some agencies. So but we also can do like recurring credit cards or recurring from your bank account. So we can work with you depending on, I don't think Park Service is working great right now for payroll deduction. So but generally we've been able to do that. And once that's set up, it continues. And that's what's great for us. We can count on it, but also for you, you don't have to think. We have several different fundraising drives through the year. Any in-person training we have, including the legislative conference, we always have a table where you can go and you can talk to people about the PAC and you can sign up to give. At our legislative conference, we always have gifts that are available for people who give. But we don't do that at our training conferences. So some people people like going to the legislative conference to get the gifts. But we also sometimes will send gifts to folks who give. And one of the times we do that is during our 30 Days of TPAC drive, which is our virtual drive in the summer. We give incentives to chapters who can raise the most money will get there's incentives for that. But also you get gifts when you give. So it's watch for that.
If you're someone who waits for, your tote bag or your mug to give
Correct.
to NPR.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And they're different every year. We have different gifts. We try to be creative. It gets really tricky. We to find like new ideas that are US union made. But we try really hard to do that. But yes, there are ways you can wait for that if you like to do it that way, or you can just set it up to give.
Well, this has been so much information. We've still got a few more minutes. I want to make sure that we open this up. If there's any questions from um, our attendees tonight, if you have any questions, feel free to either come off of mute and just ask that. If you want to drop a question in the chat, if you want it to be read anonymously, you can send it to either Stephanie or myself. We'll be happy to read those out, but we'll give it a few minutes if folks have any questions for Kata or Matt. It's been a ton of information. I feel like I've learned multiple things tonight, and I've been working at NTEU for 12 plus years.
Wow.
Um,
Glad we could
so
help.
I love it. Um, Oh, this is great. So Matt dropped in the chat that if you think of any questions and would like to get in touch with him, you can reach him at matt.sowards@nteu.org for those folks who are seeing this on a recording. And excuse me, we'll also, in the description of this recording, you should be able to get to our Take Action Center. We'll have that in the description as well. And if you'd like to get more information and see how you can get involved even before we get through elections for NPS employees. Any questions in the chat? Doesn't look like it. All right, well, I think this was so thorough. You all covered so much information. I think this was such a good introduction for what our hopeful next new chapters of NTEU are going to be able to expect as they get active with their new union. I want to thank you both for taking time, especially I think you probably are both on the East Coast as well. I know it's
Yeah.
late. Appreciate the time for sure. Stephanie, did you want to add anything to close out? Oh, reminders for the toolkit if you
Yeah,
Stephanie.
yeah, I just wanted to remind everyone that this is the week that we've kind of picked for taking our next legislative action. And so, again, you can reach out to us if you want information on that. We have the toolkit that's available to you that gives you talking points and links to all kinds of information. It's really everything that you would need in order to be successful taking an action this week. I do have one last question before we sign off with Kata and Matt. Since we are asking people to take an action this week, what is the top one or two things that you would suggest people to focus on for those actions?
So I'll take the broad ones and then Matt, feel free to jump in with anything less broad. But we're heading into another deadline on funding. So it doesn't hurt to send the please fund our agencies letter. And then we also, so the House recently passed a bill that would reinstate union rights for all of our agencies that have lost them. We are now pushing the Senate to do that. It's going to be a real uphill battle in the Senate. So we're not like trying to, we're not saying this will be a quick thing. But it would be great for people to be in the Senate to be hearing from folks about that. And that's, is another one I would say would be great to send right now. I think Matt mentioned a couple specific to NPS earlier in the call, and so those would be great since they are specific to your issues.
And I know Matt mentioned that on our legislative action page, there are specific for those issues, the funding and the what is the name of that bill in the Senate? I keep forgetting it, Matt.
The collective bargaining bill?
Yes.
It's the Protect America's Workforce Act.
Yes, Protect America's
PAWA, PAWA.
PAWA.
The abbreviation.
People on the Hill like at agencies, they like to have acronyms for everything.
It's particularly topical because NTEU is participating in a rally on the Hill on Wednesday of this week, asking the Senate to take up and pass the Protect America's Workforce Act. So that one, specifically this week, would be something that should be front and center on offices' radars. So, this is a good time to have an action week.
Right. And we do have the prompts for those two things, the funding and the Protect America's Workforce Act on the legislative action page, the NTEU legislative action page. So that would be pretty easy to find and something that you could quickly take action on.
Yeah, and I'll just mention quickly while you're talking about that, any of these things that where there's a letter, if you also want to call, you can use the letter kind of as your talking points. It's, you don't need separate ones. It's great to be able to just say, okay, here's what I'm going to say on the call. And they're pretty short and sweet usually, so it makes it easy to use them that way.
That's a great point. Thank you for bringing that up. Okay, well, if there are no further questions, I think we're going to go ahead and sign off for this evening. I want to thank everyone for your time, Matt, Kata, for your expertise. We're truly fortunate to have you join us this evening. And our next Empower Hour is January 26th. So you can check, we have flyers out for that now for our Empower Hours. And with that, I'm just going to say good night to everyone and thank you so much and see you on our next session.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Have a good night.